It is with great sadness and still much shock that I rise to speak today after the passing of our colleague and Greens luminary John Kaye, and to offer my condolences to John's partner Lynn, his family and friends, and also Kelly, who's here today, his very trusted and long-term staff member, and to Lauren as well. And I note all of the contributions so far, and it's been very moving. And also offer my condolences to all that knew him and loved him, and those who knew and loved his work. My heart does go out so much to John's family during this time, and we're very grateful to his family for facilitating such a dignified process of grief and celebration of John's life that saw over 1,000 people able to gather last week to give John such a good send-off, and we thank you very much for that. It was terribly shocking to lose John over such a short period of time. Ever a private man and so dedicated to the responsibilities of public life and to the ideals and principles of the Greens and the causes he so passionately championed, I have no doubt that whilst he may have rested physically during his treatment, he was mentally ticking off lists about the next part of the multitude of projects he was always holding in his mind at any one time. As we've heard, the son of a barrister father who fought for law reform in Victoria in the 60s and 70s, and a mother who was an environmental activist during the same era, it really is no surprise that John ended up doing the great work that he did. I first met John Kaye in about 2003 during my first teaching position in Broken Hill. I had joined the Teachers Federation as an early career teacher and won a scholarship as an Anna Stewart officer for a term in Mary Street. I heard John speak about the then Vincent inquiry and our wages case at the time, and I was incredibly struck by his eloquence as a speaker and his passion and knowledge. He was an absolutely engaging speaker and had the sort of charisma that really captures people's attention. Whether they agreed with him or not, he was captivating. In education circles, John was a dojon, and he could give you the entire history of public education in Australia and New South Wales without stopping to think, but not as a narrative, through the lens of a deeply analytical mind. I know that John will be part of the history books across a number of forums and figure prominently for lifting the profile of the Greens in New South Wales, but I have no doubt that he will feature as a key figure in the history of education reform in this state. He was regarded nationally as an authority on schools funding policy, and he informed the political debate on school funding nationally. John was by anyone's standards a success, but I don't think he allowed himself the indulgence of pondering on himself as a successful man or politician, and I certainly never saw that. His steely determination and one-pointedness about those issues dear to him, public education, renewable energy and workers' rights, to name but a few, was quite something to witness up close and personal. I was in awe of his knowledge and energy and generosity with his time. I'm not going to speak for too long, but I wanted to share a particular day that comes to mind when we spent half a day together up home when I was campaigning. We did an early press conference at Ballina Hospital, and we got into a wee bit of trouble because the TV crew filmed us on hospital grounds. And then we ducked up to Wollongbar TAFE for a quick rally and another TV and media opportunity, and then we headed to Byron for a renewables event. And this was all by lunch. And in that time, I watched John personally greet and remember dozens of people at the rally. I mean, this is in an entirely different region. And he knew the journalist by name, which I did not at the time, and he knew one of the cameramen. He was a networker extraordinaire. He'd given a rousing speech at the rally, spoken articulately and on point with first takes at the hospital presser and on health issues, and then he had literally networked with every man and his dog without even breaking a sweat. A really distinct memory from that day was sitting with him in the afternoon at Main Beach in the sun at a wooden table with a coffee, and we were chatting to a local solar energy startup guy that was our last stop for the day. I was listening, of course. Anyone who knows John, though, knows that he loved to talk. And let's just say that two energy nerds, well, there was a lot of techie talk happening. And okay, so I was half listening and I was half checking out the beach and enjoying the sun. And I did take a minute to really take in this enigmatic man. His energy was unbelievable, and he was so generous with his knowledge and intellect. Since 8 a.m, he had been switched on, and there for the public and the media, and by 2 p.m, he was still on point and hadn't yet stopped. The solar guy thought it was Christmas and asked our engineer Greenie dozens of questions, and if it wasn't for me flagging his impending flight, I have no doubt that John would have stayed for another hour. His passion to the cause was that great. I also know that the solar guy, who has now created one of the largest solar parks in the country, contacted John many times after that day to continue their conversation. And that generosity of John's time and energy never translated into the sort of utopian announceables that we see and hear so often from mainstream politics. John worked behind the scenes. He worked incredibly hard to keep the Greens' profile in the media, and we know that his early morning analyses of events were highly sought after. Never one to dwell on the difficulty of getting the Greens' message to the top of a story, John Kaye broke the ground again and again for those of us coming into public life in the party. I do believe that for some people, they instinctively know how much time they have on the planet. Whilst I would never presume to know John that deeply, as a colleague and outside observer, I think he lived his 60 years with the intensity of someone who wants to achieve a lot in the time on offer. John is remembered by all of us today for his service to the public of New South Wales and his service to Greens members and supporters across the state and the country and internationally, and to the ideals of a fair society with universal and adequately funded public education, universal healthcare and strong action on climate change.